What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Kevin Moore Show. Now, if you want to stay up to date with all my latest videos, just click that subscribe button below, and this really helps to support the show. If you're new to the show, I interview guests from a spiritual perspective, covering mainstream and alternative subjects, real-life inspirational stories, and much more. On today's show, I'm about to be joined by my two guests, Jen Ward and Marvin Schneider. Now, Jen is the author of over 19 books. She is a dynamic healer who can see and remove the blockages to happiness and more within any individual. Also, I'm joined with Marvin, who is a business consultant, author, and speaker. Both Jen and Marvin work on helping employees and owners to be in synergy with the company rather than a slave mentality, helping to lift business leaders into a more spiritual alignment and well-being of the customer and the wider community and environment. Now, Jen is also available for readings through my website, channeling.com/Jen Ward. You can also reach Jen on a personal side as well, but if you want to support my show, then just go to channeling.com/Jen Ward, and all her services are available on there as well. So let me just welcome my two guests, Jen and Marvin. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
It's welcome.
Thank you for having us.
So Jen, just to begin with, let me get you just to talk about the work that you do, because obviously some people who are watching this right now, this part two, may not have watched our first interview. So just, give us a bit of a breakdown on what you do and why you do it.
I perceive an energy. I see the blockages that are preventing people and individuals and groups from being the highest possible version of themselves. And I help them remove the blockages through this protocol that I've developed with my spirit guide. Teach them how to be their own spirit guide.
And that's called the Spiritual Freedom Technique, the SFT. And that's something, that you've developed. How many years ago was it now that came to you, that was given to you?
It was given to me over a few years, but at least 12 years ago it started, and it went for a few years, perfected what it is.
We're going to just demonstrate a little bit of that from a business perspective in just a moment, right? But the business side is important for you, right? That's my point as well.
Yes, because the business is a huge blockage in itself because of its power and its collective of individual energies. So what I do would be like pull those individual energies out of a business and give them back to the individual. But then a business should be a collection of individuals who are empowered instead of enslaved to business. So what Marvin is doing, I think, if I can speak how I understand it, is he's teaching businesses how to work as individuals together with their synergy instead of in an enslaved consciousness. Is that fair, Marvin?
That's fair.
Yeah, absolutely. And Marvin, and please chip in as well when you feel like it, Jen. Marvin, how did you meet Jen? What was the pull in you? Because you was on some sort of search, weren't you?
Yeah, so I've been a career consultant for the last sort of, let's call it 30 years. I'm showing my age, and business consultant. And I've always had an affinity for the new age, and I've sort of interacted in and amongst a number of practitioners. I saw Jen on a podcast back in July, and within the first 15 seconds of Jen opening her mouth, my first reaction was, my God, this chick's the real deal. And so we've connected ever since then. And more recently, the work that I'm doing and the work that Jen is doing has created a synergy. So we're now working to uplift humanity through the business community.
Okay. And how did your employees and your partner take the work that you've been doing? I mean, how did you break that sort of barrier to say, hey, look, you've really got to look at this?
Well, so my other partner, who we've been working on this for 2.5 decades, he's equally open and receptive to New Age. So it wasn't a hard thing.
You know, I bet you've seen, not seen, but I bet there's people out there right now, long-term business owners who have are more open to this right now than they ever were. Whether it's because they've been through a worldwide pandemic and it shifted their perception on just like how short life is, right? Or whatever reasons it is. There's something. Have you noticed that? Or am I just seeing what I want to see out there?
Yeah, look, I think for private businesses that are owned by entrepreneurs and sort of directed by entrepreneurs, there's a high degree of alignment between what they're doing and what we're talking about. In the large listed company space, so here we're talking about very large organizations, big brands, they're listed on stock exchanges, their share prices traded every day. There's probably less affinity for what we're talking about, but there is a shift coming. And the reason why there is a shift coming is because of a couple of things. One is people are beginning to realize that the old business paradigm just doesn't work. And equally important is the influence of the millennials, to be honest, because millennials are more open.
That is also important. Thank you for that, by the way. Should we just very quickly, before we get more into the work, just sort of demonstrate a quick tap as well? Just something really simple that you found to be effective and that you're using. And I mean, I'll join in as well, right? No problem. But what do you think, Jen? What could be something that we could just demonstrate just how this works?
Well, I can word it and then feed it to you guys, feed it to Marvin, and you guys can tap it out and stuff. And here's one for the listener: is removing all blockages to living our purpose in all moments. And so you say 3 times on the head, once on the chest, and now once on the abdomen. We remove all blockages to living our purpose in all moments.
Okay, I'll let Marvin start because I want the camera to go to him. So I'll let you start. I'll do it in the background as well. But if you...
Okay.
We remove all blockages to living our life's purpose in all moments. We remove all blockages to living our life's purpose in all moments. We remove all blockages to living our life's purpose in all moments. We remove all blockages to living our life's purpose in all moments. One on the abdomen. We remove all blockages to living our life's purpose in all moments.
So there you go. It can be something as simple as that, right? Which you've been doing on for a while now, and you've been going a lot deeper than that, right? That's just something a simple way just to show that how this works. For the first part, we never did that, and I just think to see yourself do it as well, Marvin. I'm sure people will appreciate that just to see how it's done. Marvin, what part of Australia are you based in right now?
Yes, I live in Melbourne, which is towards the southeast in the continent. So it's the most southern city, if you like.
Right, okay. And nice and warm as well, I bet.
Well, it is at the moment because
Yeah.
obviously we're in the middle of our winter.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I guess, yeah, where I am in West
Sorry, the middle of our summer, of
Summer,
course.
you mean? Yeah. I think I should have caught you out there. Yeah. Well, where I am in Wisconsin, and I'm sure where Jen is as well. Wisconsin's cold, and I'm sure New York's a bit chilly right now. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. Yeah. So you're coming on board because obviously you have been working with Jen for a while, and you're also a business person as well, and you represent the sort of the business side that she's a part of right now. If you want to explain it or just go into a bit more
Yeah,
detail about that, yep.
yeah, I'd love to. So I first came across Jen in about July. She did an interview on another channel, and I just happened to stumble across it, some synchronicities. And within about 15 seconds, my immediate reaction, and this is an Australianism, my immediate reaction was, this chick is the real deal. And so right away, I decided that I was going to book a private session. And the interesting thing was that the response to that prior interview was overwhelming, that it took me about a month between booking date and session date. So I used that month productively and basically went through a whole lot of her prior podcasts, and I got a real sense of the depth of the work, and I was impressed. So I had my session, and it was revealing, obviously, and we did lots of tapping. I got lots of homework, as a lot of the clients do. And we had another session about a month later. And then somewhere between those two session days, we kept communicating. And Jen basically got a bit of a sense of the work that me and my colleague is doing in the business community. And she intimately connected with that and basically came to her own conclusion that it may be time to uplift humanity through the business community, because clearly business is a significant part of humanity. Business obviously creates most of the products and services that we consume and rely on every day. And so to the extent that business in the past has not been particularly thoughtful, ethical, hasn't always had a particularly social purpose, the work that I'm doing and others around the world is about realigning business around a more of a noble social purpose. So my background is as a career strategy consultant. I work with large businesses. I have worked all over the world, in the UK, the US, in some Asian countries, predominantly Australia, though obviously I'm based in Australia. And so these are large organizations, multi-billion-dollar, listed companies on major stock exchanges. They've got thousands and thousands of people. And there are two aspects that we work on. One is strategy, which is basically deciding what products and services to offer, how to offer them, and how to basically survive, perform, compete. And so that's the hard science of business, if you like. And the other side of it is working with the people, the systems, the structures, because ultimately businesses are an aggregation of people. And I have had a short stint in a corporate life in a large bank in Oz. And basically my observation, was that, the company that I was working for, and as a consultant then, all of the companies that I've worked with are basically their culture has a high degree of toxicity almost from top to bottom. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done, both at the strategy level, which is the hard science end of business, and at the sort of human interaction level, which is sort of the more people, culture, system structures, and that's where Jen comes in. And so that's the synergy that we have. And it became very clear to me right from the beginning when I was having my private sessions. And my private sessions, by the way, we're dealing with the kinds of issues that every other person has. So releasing, blockages and tensions and issues. But it became pretty clear in my sessions that the work that Jen is doing at an individual level can be directed towards executive coaching, and that's where we're working predominantly. Executive coaching and facilitating groups.
And we're going to go back into a lot of the points that you mentioned there, but just before we do as well, what is your mission statement for your company now that you've worked with Jen for a while and that you've brought her ideas and the energy that she's given you into your life?
So my life's purpose, and those that work with us have adopted a life purpose to upgrade the business community so that being in business is an opportunity to create wealth by being of service to society. And so what that means, and so we are not running a socialist agenda. So I just should be clear about that, because a lot of people in North America, have a sort of visceral reaction to anything that smacks of a socialist agenda. So it's clearly not a socialist agenda. We are about creating wealth. There is nothing, in my view, inherently wrong with money. It's just that money ought to be, appropriately directed. And so business does work in and around money flows, and we don't see that as a problem. We see the opportunity, though, to redirect business to creating products and services and creating wealth in ways that enhance the well-being of the individual, the wider community, and importantly, the environment. And so that's our sort of the mantra, if you like, is about ongoing wealth creation in ways that enhance the well-being of the individual, the wider community, and the environment. One aspect of that, and this kind of connects back to where Jen's at, the short answer to how do you create wealth in those ways is two aspects. One is the primary source of wealth creation is innovation, creativity. It is not about shafting competitors. It is not about shafting your customers. It is about creating real products and services that really enhance the well-being of, as I said, the individual, wider community, and the environment. And the way that you do that is through innovation, creativity. Now, innovation and creativity is an innate human ability, except a lot of people have blockages. And so in order to manifest and create, because ultimately creativity is a process of obviously creating, then to bring ideas into reality and manifest, often the blockages to that are self-limiting beliefs and other issues that Jen is eminently positioned to, and I would say, by the way, uniquely positioned to help executives address. And so executive coaching is a real thing. You point to any sort of board member, CEO, senior executive in any organization that doesn't have an executive coach, and good luck trying to find too many of those. So executive coaching is a real thing. But what I've identified is that the way that Jen has an ability to approach that and help these executives identify blockages, release them so that they can get in touch with their creativity and therefore become more productive is just unique. Her abilities are off the scale capable. And quite frankly, I haven't met anyone else with these skills. and I've been dabbling in and around the alternative space for quite a while, and I've dealt with a number of people that have similar capabilities. But what I've observed is that Jen is unique.
Gosh, so much to unpack there as well. Just very quickly, when you talk about creating wealth by being of service, not just to the end user, but to society as well, don't you think that a lot of companies do maybe they don't strive initially to be of service, right? Okay, that is true. But at some point, their product is of service in some aspect.
One would think the obvious answer is yes, but disappointingly, the answer is not always yes. So there are a lot of products and services produced and consumed which, quite frankly, are not in the best interest of the individual, the wider community, and the environment. Tobacco is a great example. Sugary drinks is a great example. There are significant, externality costs from the production and consumption of these things. Here's another great example. Steel is a great product. It underpins, urban infrastructure and construction, right around the world. But the production of steel is very environmentally damaging. But the interesting thing is that there is a real push for clean steel, clean energy, and a recognition that some products and services, quite frankly, shouldn't be produced, or maybe they need to be produced in a different way. So it's not all. There's a depth to this. Yes.
Yeah, that's quite a profound mission statement. That is. Go ahead, Marvin. Yeah.
I was going to say another thing as well. You would think that it is a no-brainer that the only way you can remain in business and have a viable business is to do things that have some benefit to society. But all around the world, in North America, elsewhere, and disappointingly, even in Australia, even the top echelons of business for a long period of time have thought that their primary purpose is to maximize the share price or the value of their company. And so they, being the wider business community, have been operating under a paradigm which we describe as the shareholder primacy paradigm, which means that the primary purpose of business is to serve the interests of shareholders. Don't you think that's perverse? Just thinking about it from that level. But yet a lot of corporate law has been written around that, and so a lot of board members and executives have built muscle memory around that idea. And so when you play with that idea, the primary purpose is to make as much money as possible. And then when you have that mindset, it almost doesn't matter how you do it. And when you have that mindset, a lot of malfeasance comes in. And in Australia, elsewhere, there have been a number of commissions, royal commissions in Australia, because we are a Commonwealth country, where the focus of that commission is to identify and prosecute, here we go, malfeasance. So it's not just that it's on the border of being unethical, it is straight up malfeasance. And so thankfully, by the way, I should say this whole shareholder primacy paradigm came out of some thinking from the Chicago School of Business in the US about 30, 40 years ago. It is old consciousness. And if you've ever listened to, and if your audience has ever listened to Jen talk about, the work that she's doing, she is working to bring humanity into new and higher consciousness. And so Jen's been doing that at an individual level for a decade and then some, Jen, as far as I can tell. And we're working now to do that at the business community end.
Yeah, and I want to bring you in here, Jen, very shortly as well. And please chip in if you feel that you want to talk about anything that we're mentioning. But it to me, it feels like that you've been on this path for a long time, Marvin. And am I right to say that?
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 decades and then some. And by the way, 2 decades ago, we were a lonely voice in this space. A lot of people thought we were nuts to even think that business should have a social purpose. Now, the good thing is that maybe, the universe creates and provides some synchronicity, and maybe our ideas didn't land 2.5 decades ago because it wasn't time, because maybe the work that Jen was doing needed to, we needed to synchronize. But the good news is that at this point in time, there is a much broader acceptance that the purpose of the corporation goes well beyond maximizing share price, and that it does in fact have a social purpose. And all of the research that I've done, my colleagues have done, and many others, by the way, we're not the only ones doing this, clearly show that in fact the only way to create wealth on an ongoing basis is to do it in ways that do in fact enhance the well-being of the individual, wider community, and ultimately in the environment. Because if you try and do it any other way, millennials and sort of newer consciousness thinking people will simply not tolerate those businesses, and therefore they'll run out of customers, and therefore they won't have a viable product and a viable business.
Yeah, that's a really different way of thinking about it as well. Powerful, really powerful. What about when you come across old consciousness, and there's a lot of it out there, right? Especially in business, right? What resistance have you met when working with people with this type of thinking?
Yeah, so there is often when we meet with boards and executives and introduce the topic, there is skepticism. There is a lot of prove it to me. I'll believe it. I'll believe it when I see it, which is an interesting statement, because all creativity comes from belief before seeing it. Seeing is the last step of a creative process. But when you hear something like, I'll believe it when I see it, it's perversely, inverted. That is not the way it operates. So we do get a lot of resistance, pushback around the idea of, and skepticism that, we're in some perverse way running a socialist agenda. A lot of the incumbent board members and executives have built muscle memory around the current paradigm. So whenever there is, a lot of inbuilt muscle memory, then it takes quite a bit of effort to undo that. And a lot of what Jen's work is all about is undoing self-limiting beliefs that no longer serve you, undoing muscle memory, creating space for new muscle memory, and creating space for manifestation.
So you've had a successful career. Well, what some people would see as successful, right? As a normal success in business, and or maybe not a normal, but one that has been successful, should I say? There's different levels of success. I'm sure there is, And how much have you transformed to get to this point, would you say?
I first connected with Jen in the late August. So over the last 4 or 5 months, there's been a huge transformation, personal. So I've been working with Jen initially infrequently, but more recently, almost every day. And we're doing taps almost every day, both at a personal level, at a business level, and at a whole of humanity level. And sometimes we're doing taps for 2 hours a day, video conferencing, because obviously we're on sort of polar opposite ends of the planet. So there's been a huge personal transformation, and we are beginning, through all the tapping work that has been done, build up a reservoir of momentum, so that we're now breaking through barriers to help our clients open themselves up to be receptive to the message. Because if the client is not receptive to the message, it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter, the validity of what you say. If they're simply not receptive, then, it's just going to sort of bounce off the stratosphere. So simply having the meeting space clean from energetic interference so that the meeting can be clean, there is a level of receptivity, then we're starting to penetrate, then we're building momentum. But I should say we're actually at the front end, at the beginning of this major push. So even though we've been working on this for 2.5 decades and then some, it is really 2021, this year, that we're going to have our major sort of breakthrough. Isn't that interesting? There's a significant underlying investment, and COVID has kind of slowed things down a little bit. But again, it could be a blessing in disguise, because my view was that, at least in the beginning, COVID provided somewhere in the order of 7 billion people a moment of pause. And so, you can imagine when everyone is living very frenetic lives, a good chunk of the 7 billion people worrying about first world issues. Of course, not everyone, and unfortunately there's a lot of people that don't have that luxury, but, to be able to put things on pause and to reflect has been quite useful. And I think, I certainly know that Jen has done a lot of work in the background, releasing COVID, helping people deal with COVID, and sort of reset. But of course, 2021, at least in North America and elsewhere, is not going to be, squeaky clean either from that perspective. So.
Okay, so someone that's maybe has some sort of business, maybe watching this right now and thinking, well, my business is of service. How would I know? How would one judge if a business is of service in the right way?
I think it starts with having a clearly recognized noble intent. So the purpose of the business is a noble intent. It is grounded in an absolute intent to be of service to society. So that's the first thing. But you need to walk and chew gum and walk. And so that you then need to act in accordance with that intent. But intent comes first. And unfortunately, a lot of business, and the businesses, I should just make this clear, the businesses I work with are large listed companies, so not smaller private businesses. But it's interesting that a lot of businesses out there, the many hundreds of thousands around the world, do not, in fact, have a clearly stated and lived purpose grounded in a noble intent. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting. I mean, you could also apply that to the company's suppliers as well.
Absolutely.
How do you fit this into that part of the business, which is a really important part as well?
Yeah, so suppliers are an interesting topic. So every company has suppliers, and most companies think suppliers as being part of their enemy because they represent a cost. Okay, so there's a tension between the company, the need to have sort of input products and services, and the amount of money that you pay for them. So old consciousness thinking around a supply chain, is around how do I minimize the cost of my inputs? And so where we're shifting businesses to think about a supply chain in an ecosystem sense. So what do all of the elements, participants in the supply chain need to do to create the optimal value for the client, price the end product appropriately? And we're not saying that products need to be cheap. If they're valuable, then of course it has an appropriate price attached. But provide an appropriate product and service, price it appropriately, and then allow all of the participants in the value chain to benefit at an appropriate level. So it's a shift in consciousness.
Yes, because I mean, I suppose some businesses rely on high turnover, low profit margins, and obviously some
Yeah,
are different to that, and
yeah,
they would feel that that would be difficult to adopt this model to an existing business like that. But you're talking about an overall shift in the whole operation of the company, basically.
yeah, yeah. So a reasonable chunk of businesses A, fail to innovate, and therefore B, they have products and services that are no better than anyone else's out in the market, and therefore by definition the only way that they can win is to have the lowest price, and the only way to have the lowest price without going bankrupt is to have the lowest cost structure. And so they've got this intense, almost myopic focus on reducing cost, and that leads you into a poverty consciousness mindset. And so we need to work beyond that. So if the value of the product is so low that you have to price it so low, then you might think, what is the true innate value of this product? Maybe the product shouldn't exist anymore.
Damn, that's a different way of thinking about it, Marvin. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Wow. But then obviously this sort of shift is also a shift from the consumer end as well. I mean, what about the consumer who
Yes.
wants it for that sort of price?
Well, yes, and I certainly know of a number of people in my ecosystem that have that mindset. But I think part of the shift for humanity is to think about money and consumption in a different way. And Jen speaks about this as well, is that money in abundance is like a river that needs to flow. And if you try and dam it, then it stagnates and the system collapses. So yes, money needs to flow. You need to enjoy abundance. In my view, there's nothing wrong with money and abundance. From a sort of philosophical perspective, the interesting question is, how was the money and abundance accumulated, and to what end do you apply it? And so consumption is an interesting phenomenon. And in a lot of the Western part of the economies, excessive consumption is ingrained. And it need not be like that. And by the way, of course, excessive consumption creates excessive waste. And waste is just harmful to Gaia, the planet. So there is a lot that the business community can do to be of service to society. There's a lot that it needs to do, and therefore the work that I'm doing, that Jen's doing, that others are doing with us, it's a big agenda. And to be honest, it's our life's purpose.
Right. And when did it become so it became your life's purpose when you met Jen, or you were on that journey already, do you think?
Well, we were on the journey. We've been on this journey for about 2.5 decades, but it became real when we met Jen. And I mean, there are other things that are going on. So we found an organization. It's the largest, I won't name it, but it's the largest professional services consulting organization on the planet that is partnering with us to deliver this, because clearly there are hundreds and thousands of companies around the world that can benefit and requires assistance and can benefit from engaging consultants to help them in the transformation process, because it is a significant transformation. And, in the same way that executives benefit from executive coaching, because generally people can't see and smell their own feces. Jen can see it and smell it, unfortunately, and that's what makes her so productive and powerful. So in the same way that executives can benefit from executive coaching, then companies and businesses at a larger scale can benefit from engaging consultants to help them.
How would I make sure that it is being it is being of not just of service, but it is not just repeating the same old patterns that are out there? And how do I check myself in to make sure that some of the stuff that we're talking about right now, that it's sort of, checking the tick boxes in a sense, because that is, there are so many businesses that do the same thing, right? And like you say, maybe it's based on price that they differentiate just a little bit. But how would you sort of navigate that so that you are, making sure that deeper part of yourself, that one, it's really is serving the customer, and two, that it's okay to be the same, but what I'm trying to say is, how do you think outside the box to really offer something that is going to be different, if it's, an industry that's you're sort of joining in a sense, because you can make it work?
Yeah. So I think the short answer is, we talked about having the entire business purpose grounded in a noble intent. The next thing is to really honestly think about what value the products and services provide to the consumer. The next thing to think about is the pricing level, whether that's appropriate. The next thing to think about is, what impact does the consumption, the widespread consumption of the products and services have on the wider community and the environment, right? So consuming Starbucks and throwing away sort of single-use cups, unless there's a very vigorous recycling program sitting behind it, is not terribly great for the environment. So you just need to be aware of the impact of your business on the individual, the wider community, and the environment, and just be open and honest about that. And if there are aspects of your business that don't sort of score highly, on a rating scale, then create a conscious intent to change things. Maybe not immediately, but say over the next 3 years, I am going to do a whole bunch of things that are going to get me from a score of 2 on this dimension to a score of 4, for example, out of 5, right?
I mean, that's so important what you're saying there. I mean, just, okay, you mentioned Starbucks. How many Starbucks coffee cups, get trucked out per day, because that's the way we contain, the drink. But I mean, what else would it be that we would put? I mean, I believe that they're biodegradable, right? I don't know. I'm saying that I believe they are.
Some of them make the cups where they have seeds in them, so they're biodegradable. They also have like tree seeds in them, so if you throw them away, they grow a tree. It's a good idea.
Let me confound your audience a little bit with a provocative statement. So in business, a lot of people think that more is better. Right? More is always better. More money, more volume, more this, more that, and they're always chasing to maximize. So it's all more. But the practical reality is that more is not always better, and there is an appropriate level of consumption. There is an appropriate level of wealth creation, and so on. And so it's a balance. And so those that are trying to do too much unbalance the system, so to speak. And so there's just a reset around old engrams, if you like, because the business community has engrams. I mean, Jen talks about engrams at a personal level, but the business community has engrams, and they do need to be released and upgraded and replaced.
There's such an apathy. So people in business are are on this linear trajectory. So I don't know why they compartmentalize the apathy, because advertisement is $1 trillion business for a reason, because getting the individual's energy or enthusiasm into what you do is like fuel for what you do. And they might not understand the process of that, but at some level they do. So if you can get other ways than just like brainstorming with the brain, and because sometimes you just hit that wall, and if they could figure it out, they would have by now. Yet they have to shift from the mind to the heart, and it doesn't have to be all foo-foo and warm and fuzzy, but the heart doesn't have the same kind of glass ceilings on it that the brain does. And if they can understand in some way, like Marvin has all the language around it, if he can take some of my understandings of energy and convert them into a way that businesses can absorb them, then that's powerful, because what's wrong now is they can't process what I'm trying to teach them in energy. But it's very real and very potent. But Marvin's a genius in that way, so he can take what I do in energy and convert it into nuts and bolts for them to see the benefits of. Is that right, Marvin?
Yeah. Thank you for the genius thing. So what I'd say about that is there is a universal truth underpinning what Jen does, and the New Age community is can sort of understand aspects of the technology behind what Jen does, but the thing that I would say is that you don't need to buy into all of the New Age elements to benefit from Jen's work. And so the analogy that I draw is that you don't need to know the detailed inner workings of an internal combustion engine to drive a powerful Mercedes. And so basically Jen's product or Jen's output, think about it as a powerful Mercedes. It is the most powerful thing on the planet. So you don't need to understand how and why it works, just that then I think there needs to be some acceptance or willingness to do the work. And the work, by the way, we're talking about is tapping. And the protocols that are on Jen's website, Jen's genuinehealing.com, I think is your website. So there's that. A lot of this is explained in the books.
Can I tell him about your face? He has, so I do these meetings with him and his partner, right? And so they have, you've seen shifts in your own productivity and your own outcomes from the work, right, Marvin? That's why you stick with it. So,
definitely.
Okay, so Marvin has this face where it's like he's not, like it's something he would never have bought into, and he's just like holding judgment because he knows the judgment. And he's got this face, and where he's trying to be just hold it all in and stuff and let me do my thing without interfering with it. But he's so totally readable, and he's like trying not to say this is crazy, and you know that face, right, Marvin?
To take your word for it.
You just got a hint of it right there.
The other thing that I was going to say is that because you don't need to buy into all of the underpinnings of the New Age foundations and whatever, you don't have to buy into it. You can do the work through the tapping and the protocols that Jen has developed and is freely available. It is a true gift to humanity that these protocols are available to anyone and everyone, all comers, for free. And those protocols can be applied by individuals where they identify their own issues and what it is that they want to release, blockages they wish to remove, things that they wish to manifest, negative influences that they wish to overcome. All right, so that is an absolute gift to humanity. But what I've observed is that the real powerful thing is when people are working in private sessions with Jen, and here's why, is because Jen has the ability, because of innately who she is and her background, and I think you discussed part of that in part one, she has an ability to see into and to identify core issues, core beliefs, core blockages, and other things that the person themselves would not be able to identify in a month of Sundays. And so you can do the work without having a private session with Jen, and that's fine. The taps are freely available. The real power is in private session, because in 1 hour, it's like, a month of Sundays of doing it on your own. And so it really is quite powerful. And so, when those techniques are then applied in an executive coaching environment, so you've got a client we call it executives, they don't have to be executives, but they basically commit to a program, a series of sessions with Jen, so she can take them from the beginning, releasing core issues and probably working at a more personal level towards, in the middle of, let's say it's a 6-session program, so units of 6 sessions. So in the middle, she might start working around, aligning life purpose with corporate purpose. And then sort of towards the end, working with the client to connect the person to their higher purpose, their higher mind, become more productive, more creative, more engaging, and so on.
And actually, coming from that space, I'm just thinking in my head that actually, I get sort of hear the voices of, like, the money. But actually, by coming from that space and with everything you've spoken about as well, for the end user, all around, it's more beneficial for everyone. So of course, everything's, there's more money, there's more giving back to the clients. There's it's a whole win-win situation, really, to be honest, the way I see what you're sort of describing.
That's right, and it really is important that it is a win-win proposition. Otherwise, if it's one-sided, it just doesn't, pass what we call in Australia the pub test. I'm sure you can identify with that, Kevin. So yes, there is a really big win-win aspect, and Jen Jen does still work with private individuals working on issues. But where she's going at the moment, she's connected to the purpose to, transition to helping uplift humanity by, working with the business community.
But isn't it an interesting time when, we could have done this interview maybe a year ago, and just at the very beginning of COVID, and who, even in that time, was that bothered about, was for some people, about the whole business side. But right now, when the economy in some respects for people have lost their jobs and they're actually looking at going self-employed and doing their own thing, right? That business, is a really important thing right now. Maybe just as important as it's ever been, right? Even for self, to be your own, I'll use the word lightly, but entrepreneur, right? Because there's a lot more people right now just even selling digital products. Okay. So, and this can be applied to digital products as well.
Absolutely. I mean, the core ideas of creating wealth by being of service to society is ubiquitous. It's not limited to particular industry segments.
This is wonderful. I'm glad that the world is getting to hear Marvin's genius. And the thing is I perceive an energy, right? And I meet a lot of people. I meet celebrities and stuff. I always see their BS. And what Marvin brings to the table is like, okay, so I have this way I see the world, right? And I see like in a way what I do for humanity is I hold the vibration of love and peace for the world, because it was kind of eked out. We almost got to the brink where there was no love, no peace anywhere. And so people like myself, even people who don't realize it, when they can be kind and they can be around abuse and just calm, they're actually holding space and the vibration of peace for the world. And it does matter. What they do matters. Well, my friend Marvin here holds the vibration of integrity. And integrity is a real important thing in the future. And a lot of business and a lot of industries have lost the vibration of integrity. And so they need someone like Marvin, maybe with a little bit of help on my part, that can take that vibration and disperse it into the collective. But the integrity that he holds is beyond reproach. And if he did nothing else but fed that integrity into the collective, then this world would be better for that.
Well, let me ask you, Jen, as well. What if more companies were coming from this space that we've just briefly discussing right now? What would the world look
Yes,
like?
world would look like what we see it as. So it's like from a young child, from infancy, we're taught to like inflow, like vacuum cleaners, just suck up and consume all the, we're actually trained to be consumers. That's what advertisement is. Not what we are as spiritual beings. It goes against our nature. As nature, we outflow. So what I've been doing is teaching people to shift the paradigms from taking to giving. And that's what living your purpose is shifting your paradigm from taking to giving. And what Marvin's doing is offering businesses the opportunity to understand how to shift their whole mechanism from taking to giving. And it needs that support because there's no blueprints anymore. So the blueprints come from an intangible source. And for some reason, Marvin has a piece of the blueprint and I have a piece of the blueprint. And when we work together, we assist very well others to be able to like put that together and come up with the ways and the means to do this nuts and bolts. Right, Marvin?
Absolutely. And I would say that obviously working at an individual level is very powerful, but think about an organization, a company as being an individual. So you can be working at the whole of company level.
So if my guides told me when I started to realize how I could shift someone really easily, they said if you can do it with one person, you can do it with 7 billion. And now we're doing it with a collective of people like it's an individual. And to me, in energy, a business is just merely a compilation of the issues that each individual brings to the table. So it's like the daddy issues, the unworthiness, the whatever their issues are, it's just the average of everyone. So if you can shift out, if you can remove those issues, either from the individuals altogether or as a group, doesn't matter to me, doesn't matter to you, Myron, doesn't matter, as long as they release, then you can shift that whole structure from taking to giving. And you don't have to figure out how. Marvin knows how to do it for you. You just need to come from the heart and trust the integrity of what he brings to the table and allow him to assist you in doing that.
And you may find as well that by coming from that space and, the pull to want to give this a go at a much deeper level than you can understand, right? Just as it happened for Marvin, that, if you've got resistance in, I'll go back to it, suppliers, right? Then you may find that, there are some things that have to shift in the company. I mean, you may have resistance in suppliers who, if you're asking them to give a bit more, right, to give back to people, some of them may say, I'm not doing that, or, I give enough, or, I'm, whatever their reason may be. It could be as well from the employee side, right? You're doing this new type of way. Obviously, this is an overall business side, but go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
So the problem with how you're seeing this and how businesses are seeing it is that you're seeing that there's only one form of abundance. You're seeing the only time of abundance is monetary wealth. And just worshiping monetary wealth is like looking at the time, the clock, and instead of like valuing every hour on the hour, you only come to life at 12, noon, and midnight. And everything else you just disregard because you're only focused on monetary wealth. So you throw out health, well-being, friendships, peace of mind, the environment. So what needs to happen is an understanding and an appreciation of all forms of abundance. Like a lot of people want monetary wealth so they can go on vacation and heal from all the damage that their work has done. How about if they enjoy their work and they bring in those other kinds of abundance, like not separating their purpose from their vocation? That's another thing people do. They give up. So many people come to me, I want to live my purpose, but I have to make money, so I have to go do this job. So they're separating their purpose
Yep.
from their
You hear that all the
vocation.
time, right? What's your answer to that?
It's not necessary. You live your vocation and your purpose, they're aligned. So instead of like being talked out of what you do what you love, and you do that and you make that your vocation, and and you remove all the blockages to figuring out how to do that without, daddy paid for college. I have to like be a doctor because he wants to. I hate being a doctor. I hate my life. That no, you have to do what you love, because when you do what you love, you can be a success and have those other things. But but when you stop listening to your heart, when you stop listening to yourself, you just dead inside, and you can't give any more than you can if you're not opened inside, right?
I'll give a personal perspective on this, and you might resonate with this, Kevin, as well, and I'm sure a reasonable chunk of your audience will. So 2.5 decades ago, I stepped down from a mainstream regular income consulting environment into, a boutique startup, and so I became an entrepreneur. That was about 2.5 decades ago. It hasn't all been smooth sailing. There have been some blockages and trying times. There's, a lot of times clients have said no when, desperately just, wanted a client, and various other things. But here's the point. And by the way, in those 2.5 decades, I've had the most fun I've ever had, despite. But here's the point that I'd like to make, and I'm only sharing a personal perspective, is my point is that despite all of those, issues and whatever, the universe has provided. I'm here. Mm-hmm. I exist. And I've really enjoyed what I've done, and I'm thankful for that. And so, the way I've dealt with it is to have an intention, work on it, let it go, and see what happens. But when I let it go, I'm not sitting on my laurels. It's not like, oh, well, I'll just stay in bed all week and just allow the universe to rearrange itself around me without me doing anything. So there is work to be done. But the way I deal with it is to release, set the intention, do the work, release any expectations of the outcome, and then be blessed in what is provided. And generally, it is an appropriate level of abundance at the appropriate time. And yes, Jen, it's not always monetary abundance. The abundance comes in all forms. So I just thought I'd offer that personal perspective. That's not to say that it's going to happen that way for everyone. It can. I believe it can. So I believe my experience is formula, but there will always be those out there that says, well, it didn't happen that way for me. And so I don't want to invalidate anyone else's experience. I just thought I'd offer mine.
That's a really important one, and thank you for that. And we're talking about entrepreneurs, or becoming self-employed, or having your own business, whatever way that we've discussed it. But there's also people also want jobs as well. So you could apply what both you and Jen have said to the person that just wants a job by living in purpose for the job that they're doing as well. And that may be working for someone else is what I'm talking about. Working for you, Marvin.
So perhaps I can provide a perspective on that. So when businesses are transformed around the way that we've briefly touched on today, basically they will become better businesses and better companies for people to work with, so that the company does have a purpose, it has a noble intent, and it is actually a pleasure to go to work and work in those. And therefore it does provide a meaningful income, a meaningful role, allows you to express creativity and individualism and so on. And so they become better companies to be employed in. And so, yes, not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, but it's not a great environment where you actually go to work because you have to make rent and you hate your boss because he's toxic. right? That's not a good environment.
Another issue about business, and this is, I'm going to bring in my alternative point of view right now, is the problem with business is both male and female in business and in society right now are being driven in male energy. Because male energy is like focused, it's goal driven, it's hierarchical. You got to be the best, you got to like at all costs. That's all male energy, and there's a place for it, but it needs to be balanced with the female energy. The female energy is all expansive, it's outside the box, it gets an overview, it takes everything into consideration. So this big movement to improve business is also a means of balancing out the female energy with the male energy. And by the way, female energy doesn't need to be the top dog. Female energy is happy to let other people shine and to give what she can to help others. And that's what's missing in the businesses. And it's something that I offer. Like when someone does a private session with me, actually download all of my records that I can energetically with them as much as they're able to receive it. So usually someone wants to be the top dog in what they do and what they bring to the table. Not me. I want everybody to benefit.
Do you think that's women of a certain decade as well, maybe? And I'm not being sexist here, right? But they took on too much of the male energy
Yes.
and
Mhm.
and became the problem they were looking for sometimes. Yeah. Or
They're all doing it in male energy for the most part. And you can tell when a woman's in male energy, the term barracuda. Even women who are, I don't want to offend anybody, but who like put on makeup to get a man and like they're really beautiful and strikingly beautiful, dressed to the nines, and why they can't get a man? Well, they put it on their makeup, they're putting on their thing like armor, like a warrior going to war. And that's like repulsive to male energy because male energy doesn't want more. So as beautiful as they may be, they just like let down their hair and let down the armor. They would be more attractive energy.
I just want to bring up something that Marvin said as well, is that obviously, when the company, and I'm personifying words here, but when the company is in purpose, when the product is really to serve, right? Oh my God, that to me resonates so deeply. You imagine if you really put your effort into the product to make it really serve, and I don't know, it's almost like, making a Bentley for just the normal business. And imagine if we was all products were sort of Bentleys in the sense of the time that goes into putting that product together.
Yeah. And so can you imagine what it's like for employees that come to work every day working in that environment because they get a real sense of service through their employment?
Yeah, because they're contributing towards that. No matter what, it may not be a Bentley. Who knows what it is, right? Or just in general terms. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's an intoxicating idea. So I'm fairly certain that I and you, maybe Kevin, have some experience with intoxication. So from time to time, but it is an intoxicating idea. It is intoxicating, and it gives you a buzz and a high beyond, the in the moment. And so, and here's the other funny thing, right? So it's like, when we go to potential clients, organizations say, wouldn't you like to sign up for this as a purpose? And, you get some kind of resistance. And then you kind of sit back and you say, well, who wouldn't want a piece of that action? Creating a healthy, vibrant, viable business that creates wealth on an ongoing basis and does it in a way that enhances the well-being of the individual, the wider community, and the environment. Who wouldn't want a piece of that action? Please.
The thing is there's a synergy to being in that, because I've been in that situation on, waitressing. I mean, come on. Some of my most joyous times were when I was waitressing and I was putting all of myself into these people and, whatever. And then everybody on a long shift, we're all tired and we're all working together. There's a synergy creates, and there's this goodwill and a feeding off of each other. And what's needed is some aware, executives or something to get a sense of that, so they can create that environment so other people can experience that and it can expound. Right, Marvin?
Absolutely. And when a small number of organizations do this, go down this path, experience, enormous success, it'll create the catalyst for them everyone else to jump on board. And when that happens, when there's a sufficient momentum behind this, take another look at the world around you and it'll be a better place.
Do you see any of the big companies out there sort of close to any of this sort of discussion today?
We see, in fact, we've developed a rating or a grading system on 2 dimensions. So one dimension is the extent to which they live and operate in accordance with these principles. And, we've got, a couple of dozen sort of sub-factors that we can observe, rate, and objectively assess. That's one dimension. The other dimension is the extent to which the organizations has the DNA or the systems and processes and structures and creates the conditions for success. So we've got a 2-dimensional matrix. Generally, what we find is that most companies are sub-average, below average, from a scale from woeful to best practice. So we haven't seen too many examples of companies that are best practice on all dimensions. And in general, on a rating scale of 1 to 5, most companies would rate some ways less than 3 on both of the dimensions. Now, the point about that is that even great companies, and there are some great companies, I'm going to talk about one not one because I don't want to single them out. I'll talk about a cluster of companies in a second. But even good companies have opportunity for improvement. That's the point. But with the vast majority of the hundreds of thousands, and I'm talking about the large listed companies, not the sort of private companies, the hundreds of thousands, there is so much work to be done, Kevin. It's just, it's mind-boggling. And that's why we had to partner, quite frankly, with the largest professional services firm on the planet, or one of the largest. The cluster of companies that are probably closest to being, operating in accordance with these ideas, and not all of them have implemented them as successfully as others, is a cluster of companies around what we call B Corps, benefit corporations. So B Corps is a legally constituted structure for a company whose basic has a benefit purpose, a stated benefit purpose. And then B Corps are starting to gain momentum in North America. The other thing that I'd say is that people, companies, and the politic in the UK and Europe is more advanced on this thinking than, unfortunately, North America, Oz, and elsewhere. So, in a way, it is interesting that me and my colleagues are based in Australia, where Australia is probably a laggard in the adoption of this, and therefore it makes our life harder to get traction. When in fact a lot of companies, executives, and the politic in the UK and Europe is much more amenable to this thinking. So, and maybe one way to think about that is that we were taken to Oz for a reason, and that is that if we can make it successful here, we can make it successful anywhere, right? So why start at the easiest? So there could be a silver lining.
Marvin, can I ask a question, Kevin? Because I'm just wondering, the businesses and what, I can tell what level of self-awareness a person has to want to shift. Yeah. So what's your hope with businesses? What level would you say their self-awareness would be at in general of wanting to shift?
Right now, I'd say fairly low, and that's why we're doing the work. So Jen, myself, and some of my colleagues are doing taps every day for a couple of hours a day, almost 7 days a week. We do take a break every now and then because, hey, it's intense work to raise that preparedness and the propensity to want to shift.
I have an idea. If anybody wanted to do business taps to help humanity or something, they could like connect with me or something, and as we rate them up, they can do them on their own or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. What we found is that the more people that do these taps, sometimes simultaneously, but at least on the same day, it just sort of adds momentum, a flow in the river. And
I have had, it's kind of an example of like changing, shifting positions in the world. And my guides were telling me to tell you about one. And I know you're not going to believe that this was my work, but this, if you ask anybody on my page, this was my personal, is remember a few years ago, the pink ribbon campaign, where everything was a pink ribbon, every sports team, everyone. And then it really bothered me for a couple of reasons. It was people were going to drop off and realizing that they were working against it, and it was just going to be part of their vernacular is inviting disease in. And the pink ribbon is also associated with a little girl. So that we're associating pink with a disease when it's also the color of, so it was tainting our baby girls, female energy. So anyways, we put out some taps and the intention really strong to stop that campaign and that connection. And if you notice, that dropped off pretty quickly a few years ago.
That's interesting, that is, Jen, that, when you look at the vibration of the color of the ribbon and that it means female, and then how you, but that you could put to business as well. Do you know what I mean? Like how we associate things with business, and it's the energy that you attach to it and stuff. And
Yes. Well, we've done that. I've done that in business, but like my guides told me that would be the most tangible way to show you evidence of kind of what is able to happen out there in consciousness.
Well, here's a question. Go ahead. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Sorry.
There's a lot of what's happening in politics and stuff is subliminal. It's in the psychic realms. And so what I'm able to do is I'm able to dissipate those psychic reserves that nefarious energies use to drive negative intentions. So when there's suffering in the world, there's a real purpose on the purpose of negative intentions. Suffering fuels negative intention. It's actually psychic fuel. So what I do in energy, because I can see this and I don't like it, I've been abused. I know people don't like to be the victims of this stuff. I basically, with the taps, go in and kind of like cut open those fuel tanks and drain them. And all the energy that they've been stockpiling, these suffering and stuff, it goes back to the individual. And individuals are empowered in ways that they don't realize a few years ago. But that's a conscious intention that I have been working on behind the scenes, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. And what you're making me think as well is that what if you've got okay, so you've got a number of employees. It may just be a few employees, whatever. It could be many employees, right? And you want to implement what both yourself and Marvin are, I think, some wonderful ideas that could really help the company, right? And obviously tapping, it's obviously part of your work. What if you've got employees that don't want to do the tap in, right? That's fine as well, isn't it? I mean, yes, you've all got to grow together, but you can't force people to do something they don't want to do, right?
Well, you can do the tapping in a way, and my spirit guides, there's a belief that you can do the taps, like there's another protocol, the peanut butter and jelly tap, and like you can do it like I don't know any reference points in business, Marvin, but something negative. So you could put in there like all employees being disgruntled. So you can do the energetic cleanse. Anybody who wants to in the company, PB&J, between releasing all the employees from being disgruntled or whatever their issues is, not being paid enough, not caring about the environment. And so in general, it can help everybody. But no, you have free will and you're not forcing anybody, and it's not going to influence people in a way that takes anything from you. that's theirs. That's the sovereign self. It's just going to remove blockages and stagnant energy that's not them.
So the other thing I was going to say is, I
go ahead,
agree,
Marvin.
you can't force people to adopt a protocol, but the thing is that at one level, all you need is a small number or a sufficient number or some kind of a critical mass. Because when the shifts occur in those individuals, then it's like love, right? So once you portray and emanate love, then basically the recipient, the other person, kind of sees it, feels it, and then they behave differently. So let's put it this way: the positive aspects that flow from this is contagious in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. And so my guides always show me like someone like a Gandhi or a Mandela or a Martin Luther King Jr. There's no limit. There's no cap on what one human heart, supported by the mind, can do. Now, the problem with most of business right now is it's got the glass ceiling of the mind first, and sometimes the heart to fuel it. But what Marvin does, and what I do and I help, is take it that from the mind to the heart and fuel the heart with the mind. So it's a whole different dynamic, and there's no glass ceilings on it. The ego doesn't control the heart, and the ego is what puts the glass ceiling on. Make sense?
This is a really deep, when it comes to business conversation, because we all, it's the way that we operate, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but here's the thing. I can see the Akashic records of the future.
Right.
And this, what we're doing right now is a seed for higher consciousness. And some people who know you and know what you do and know what we do now will be able to come back to this point and say, that was the intention. That was the shift happened. That's when it began. And I can see just this intention being into the collective is a big deal.
You guys have shifted my mind, completely. And I knew this was going to be important back a couple of weeks ago or a week ago, whenever it was. And it is. I can see that now. What would you say, Marvin, is an important message to leave the audience with, and how can people get in contact with you to want to take this conversation further?
So I think the message is just do it. So just do it means basically you don't have to sort of cogitate and wonder whether this is the right thing to do. It's so self-evidently obvious. Just do it. So that would be my message. You don't have to worry about the details of how to do it, because the universe will provide the answers at the right amount of time. So just do it. How to get in contact with Jen is on presumably a link in the description to the video. At this stage, I'm operating in and amongst this consulting firm. We haven't quite finalized the agreements and so on. So, you'll be hearing plenty more about that. And if there are those that are in my target space, which is, board members, executives in large corporates that are listening to this, that want to know more before we kind of go live with a global consulting firm, contact via Jen. And because we are offering executive coaching, or Jen is offering executive coaching sessions and so on.
Yeah, but you do help me with that, because I have no reference point for business. So you teach me how to stay in some. He teaches me how to stay in some guardrails, so I don't scare the executives.
And what would you say is your important message for this particular interview as well, Jen?
Oh, there's so many people out there who are starving to be a part of something bigger. We incarnated right now at this time do exactly this, and you're witnessing it. And it's a miracle Marvin came on this with me, because he's on the other side of the world and I'm on the earth, and I think I came here, I kind of get a sense that I came here just to serve for the most part. And you know how there's this belief system that the poles are shifting? Well, to me, that's symbolic to me because the poles are shifting, is bringing me to Oz and the shift in poles. And when that dynamic happens, there'll be a shift into world peace. I came here to bring about world.
I will link the details in the description below, and anything that we've discussed as well will be in there. And of course, Jen, all your links will be there as well. I'll link the part one of this interview, and I just want to say to you both, I look forward to maybe seeing you guys in person one day to discuss this as time's gone on. When we're in different parts of the world, it would be great to meet up at some point to do a podcast. So just thank you both very, very much for coming on right now.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Thank you. Love your work, by the way.
You're amazing. I see you. I see you in the future, and you are amazing. So whatever you need to get over those blockages, you just connect with me anytime because I see who you are.
Oh, I'm working on those blockages, I swear to God.
I know.
I am. Well, thank you so much.